So the story obviously starts several hundred years ago, where there were thousands of rhino living in Africa. Two main varieties, white and black, but with some subspecies within that. The white rhino were hunted down to only about 10 individuals by the early 1900s. And the black rhino sustained larger numbers for quite a while until within the last several decades they were hunted almost to extinction in the rest of Africa. But within South Africa there were still some populations left, and we have a few thousand in South Africa now. The white rhino, the southern white rhino, there were 10 individuals, as I mentioned, in about 1900, and they were very carefully protected in national park environments and bred until there were a couple of hundred and then a couple of thousand. And as those numbers got to a couple of thousand, the people who were at that point in charge of protecting them, that's Dr. Ian Player, Dr. George Hughes, Dave Cook, they realized that the secret to the long-term survival of rhino was diversification of their habitat. So they first expanded into additional game reserves, and that's when they were reintroduced into Kruger. And then they allowed foreign zoos to purchase as well. And then they realized that the private individuals within South Africa held the real opportunity to expand habitat significantly. And that's true even today, because about 7% of South African land is under conservation that is government owned. And then about another 24% of South African land mass is used for conservation and is privately owned. So the private individuals have really brought their share to the party with habitat, and habitat is the key to conservation. And it's been the key for rhino conservation as well, because when they started selling, they sold small numbers to private individuals. And they hoped that those private individuals would protect them and nurture them and grow those populations, and that's exactly what happened. So the numbers grew slowly but surely, but exponentially, and that's how populations expand, until the private individuals had about 3,000 rhino in private care about 10 years ago. And government, meanwhile, about the same time period, had about 18,000 southern white rhino under their protection. So in the last 10 years, we've seen an absolute slaughter of rhino across South Africa, and that's, of course, hit government populations worse than private populations, because there's just a difference in how seriously one takes their responsibilities when it's your responsibility privately, and it's not something that's just your job. So in government hands, the rhino population over the last 10 years has gone from about 18,000 to probably only about 2,000, and maybe less. We have a government that has admitted to have lost 70% of the rhino in their care over the last 10 years. And that's actually just to 2019, and the slaughter has continued unabated, and we're now in 2021. So you can imagine that 70% has gotten worse, and from what we understand, it's 90%. So they've gone from 18,000 rhino to probably under 2,000 rhino. Meanwhile, in private populations, we've gone from about 3,000 rhino to about 9,500 rhino. And so while their numbers have dropped precipitously, ours have climbed, because we take the conservation burden very carefully and very seriously. And so in 10 years, we've gone from a situation where government rhino outnumbered private rhino 6-1, and the gravitational center of rhino conservation was with government populations, to where it's completely inverted. And now we have 9,000 rhino in private hands versus 2,000 left in government hands. And very clearly, the future of the rhino depends upon private conservation now.